I never imagined it would end up like this. When I first met John, he was my world. We were young, full of dreams, and in love. I believed in the idea of family, giving everything to the ones you love and watching it all come together. John was ambitious, always striving for more, and I admired him for it. We made sacrifices, yes, but it was for a future we were building together. Or at least that's what I told myself. The kids came, and with them, the unspoken promises of a life full of love and togetherness. I sacrificed my career to stay home, raising them, making sure they never lacked for anything. I focused on making sure the house was perfect, dinner was ready, and John had everything he needed. I didn't question it. After all, this was what marriage was about, wasn't it? Giving up parts of yourself for the sake of your family. But over time, I started to notice the cracks in the foundation. The first time it really hit me was during one of those late night conversations I used to cherish. We sat down after the kids had gone to bed and I tried to talk to him about our day. He didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on his phone, scrolling endlessly. I sat there waiting for him to look at me, but he never did. I remember asking him if everything was okay. Of course, he said, his voice absent as if he was just going through the motions, but it wasn't okay. I could feel it, this growing distance between us that neither of us had acknowledged. A few weeks later, he came home late again. I didn't ask why. I already knew the answer. The work, the endless meetings. He told me it was just a phase, that things would settle down soon. But that soon never came. Asterisk, it wasn't just the late nights that bothered me. It was the little things, the way he stopped noticing when I wore something new, the way he would respond to me with a half-hearted when I asked how his day went. I started feeling like a ghost in my own home, invisible to the one person I thought would always see me. I tried to talk to him about it. I tried to tell him how lonely I felt, how we were no longer the couple we once were. But each time I brought it up, he would dismiss it. I'm just tired, he'd say. Work is overwhelming. I'll make it up to you soon. But soon never came. One day, I found myself sitting in the living room staring at the empty space. Beside me, John was working again, buried in his laptop, and I realized I hadn't felt his touch in weeks. I hadn't felt the warmth of his presence, the connection that had once been the foundation of our marriage. I wasn't angry at first. I was just empty. I didn't know how to reach him anymore. The love we had felt so real, so alive, but now it was fading, and I couldn't find a way to revive it. It was as if our marriage had turned into a routine, something to get through, not something to enjoy. Asterisk, it was during a weekend getaway we had planned, a last-ditch attempt to reignite the spark between us that I first felt the real sting. We had gone to a small cabin in the mountains, away from the pressures of work and daily life. I thought it would help us reconnect, but I was wrong. He was still on his phone, checking emails and messages, while I tried to relax and enjoy the weekend. After dinner, I suggested we take a walk, but he declined. He said he was tired and wanted to rest. I went out alone, but it felt so strange, walking in nature with nothing but the sound of my own footsteps. I kept waiting for him to join me, but he never did. I came back to the cabin to find him asleep, his phone still in his hand. The room felt cold, despite the fire in the fireplace. I sat there, staring at him, wondering when we became so disconnected. When did he stop seeing me? Asterisk, I had my suspicions for a while, but I never allowed myself to believe them. After all, I was married to John, my partner, my confidant. But one day, as I was sorting through some papers, I found a receipt for a fancy restaurant, dinner for two. The date on the receipt was recent, just a few days ago. My heart sank. I didn't have to ask who the second person was. It was Maya King, one of John's colleagues. I had heard her name before, but never in a way that made me feel threatened. Yet here it was, undeniable proof that something had been happening behind my back. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed time to process the pain, the betrayal. How had I let myself become so blind? How had I allowed this to happen? That night after dinner, I confronted him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just asked him directly, is there something going on between you and Maya? He froze. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he looked at me, his face pale. It's not what you think, Sarah, he said, his voice shaky. Then what is it, John? I asked, feeling a cold fury rise within me. Tell me the truth, asterisk. The truth came out slowly, like pulling off a Band-Aid. He admitted that he had become emotionally involved with Maya, that it started out innocently enough, but it had escalated. Over time, he claimed that it wasn't physical, but I wasn't sure if that mattered anymore. The emotional betrayal cut deeper than anything else. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his voice weak. But I've been so lost, so overwhelmed. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to fix us. Us? I repeated bitterly. You haven't cared about us for a long time, John. I couldn't keep the tears back anymore. I had spent so many years holding everything together, trying to make our family perfect. But this was the breaking point. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said softly. I don't know if I can stay in a marriage where I'm nothing more than an afterthought. He didn't respond. He just sat there, waiting for me to make the decision for both of us. Asterisk, the days that followed were filled with silence. The house felt colder, emptier. I spent my time thinking, processing, and wondering if there was any way forward. Could I forgive him? Could I pretend like nothing had happened? But deep down, I knew the answer. I couldn't. I filed for divorce a few weeks later. It wasn't something I did lightly, but it was the only way I could reclaim myself. I wasn't just letting go of John. I was letting go of the version of myself that had been lost in the process of being his wife and the mother of our children. I had lost myself in trying to hold everything together, and now I was determined to find myself again. Asterisk, the first few months after the divorce were a whirlwind. It was hard to adjust, but I started taking small steps toward rebuilding my life. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I signed up for a writing class, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. The kids were adjusting, too. Grace was more independent now, and Ben seemed to be finding solace in his art. It wasn't easy, but we were moving forward together, finding new paths for ourselves. And then one day I received a letter. It was from John. He apologized again, this time without any excuses. He admitted that he had taken me for granted, that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. I had already made my peace with the past, and I had learned to forgive myself for staying in a marriage that didn't serve me anymore. I wasn't the same person I had been when I married him. I had learned to stand on my own, to rebuild my life, and to embrace my independence. Asterisk. The divorce was final, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely again. It wasn't the kind of freedom I had hoped for when I married John all those years ago, but it was a freedom, all the same freedom from the emotional weight that had kept me tethered to someone who didn't value me. The house was quiet. The silence was different now. It wasn't filled with the tension of unspoken words or the sorrow of loneliness in the presence of someone who wasn't truly present. It was a peaceful quiet, almost like the calm after a storm. I realized that after all these years, I had forgotten what silence felt like, what it meant to just be without constant distraction. Grace and Ben were doing better, adjusting to the new normal. Grace, always perceptive, knew it was going to be a long road, but she was strong. and I could see her becoming more and more like me, resilient, unafraid to take life by the reins. Ben, on the other hand, took it harder. He was quieter, more withdrawn. I knew he wasn't okay, and yet he wouldn't talk about it. I kept giving him space, but also made sure to let him know I was here when he was ready to speak. But through all the chaos of the first few weeks after the divorce, one thing remained clear. I had to focus on myself. For so many years, I had been everything for everyone: wife, mother, daughter, friend, and in doing so, I had lost myself. Now it was time to find out who I was again. I signed up for a writing class. I had always loved writing, but somewhere along the way I had put my passions on the back burner. It was time to reignite that spark, to rediscover the woman I had once been before I got lost in the roles I played. The first class was intimidating. The group was full of younger, enthusiastic writers, and I felt out of place. But as the weeks went by, I started to find my voice again. I poured my emotions into the words, using them to untangle the knots that had been twisted inside me for years. And slowly, I began to heal. I started dating again, nothing serious, just casual meetups, with people who reminded me that I was still desirable. The thought of finding love again seemed impossible at first, but with every date, I found that I was regaining my confidence piece by piece. Then there was Holly. She had been there through all of it, the breakdown of my marriage, the late night talks, the words of encouragement. She was my rock, the friend who never judged me, who always had a listening ear and a way to make me laugh when I thought I might break down. I'll never forget the day she said to me, "Clara, you're more than just a mother or a wife. You're you, and you've got so much to give. You just need to start giving it to yourself." It was a simple phrase, but it stuck with me. I had spent so many years giving everything to John, to the kids, to everyone around me, that I forgot to give anything to myself. Now, I was starting to change that. I was starting to see myself as a whole person again, someone who didn't need a man to define her worth, someone who didn't need anyone's approval to feel good about herself. Asterisk, about 6 months after the divorce, John came to see me. It was an awkward visit. I wasn't sure what to expect, whether he was coming to apologize again, or if he was seeking closure, or perhaps even hoping to reconcile. I had no illusions that our marriage could be fixed. That bridge had burned, and nothing was going to rebuild it. But still, when I saw him standing at my doorstep, a part of me felt something: old feelings, old habits. For a moment, I considered inviting him in, but then I remembered who I was now. I wasn't that woman anymore. "Clara," he said, his voice softer than it had been in years. "I know I've made a mess of things. I've hurt you. I hurt the kids. I just don't know what I was thinking. I don't know where I lost myself, but I want to try to fix it for you, for us." I shook my head slowly. "John, it's too late for that. What we had is gone. I can't pretend anymore that we're the same people. You've been living a different life, and I've been holding on to an illusion of what we were. I can't go back to that." He stared at me, his expression a mixture of sorrow and regret. "So that's it? After everything?" "Yes, John, that's it. I've spent so many years pretending things were okay, putting up with your indifference. I've spent so long losing myself that I can't even recognize the person I was, and I won't go back to that." For a moment, he said nothing. His shoulders slumped, and I could see the weight of the years we'd spent together finally taking a toll on him, but there was nothing more to say. The years of neglect, of emotional distance, of broken promises, they had built a wall that neither of us could tear down. "I'm sorry, Clara," he whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything I needed to say. Asterisk. The months continued to pass, and life began to settle into a rhythm. I was becoming more and more comfortable in my new skin. I had made peace with the past, and while I wasn't naive enough to forget the pain, I have learned that I wasn't defined by it. Grace was about to leave for college, and while I was proud of her, I couldn't help but feel a little sad. My little girl, all grown up, leaving the nest. Ben was doing better. He had started to open up more, and I knew he had finally found a way to cope with everything that had happened. We were all healing in our own ways, and me, well, I was still finding my way. I didn't know exactly where my future was headed, but I knew one thing: it was mine to shape. I no longer had to live for someone else. I could live for myself. I found a new job, a marketing role at a small but promising company. It was the first step into a career I had put aside for so long, and it felt amazing to be doing something just for me, something that didn't involve keeping anyone else happy. It was my time, my turn to thrive. One evening, as I sat alone in my new apartment, a space I had carefully curated for myself, I realized something. For the first time in years, I was content. I wasn't waiting for someone else to complete me. I wasn't defined by my past, by John, or by any of the mistakes I had made. I was Clara Mitchell, and that was enough. Asterisk, a few years later, my life had changed completely. Grace had graduated and was living her dream, while Ben had gone off to college, finding his own path. As for me, I was still working in my marketing job, but I had grown more confident in who I was. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, and I had learned to embrace every part of it. John and I were cordial when we saw each other. There were no lingering emotions, no regrets. Just two people who had once shared a life and now understood that sometimes things just weren't meant to last, but I had no bitterness. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to a marriage or to someone else's approval. My worth was my own, and I had the power to shape my future. As I sat at my desk one evening, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance, I realized something important. The light that had once seemed so dim had finally returned, and it was brighter than ever before. The light that I had been searching for was within me all along, and that light, my light, would never fade again. Asterisk.